Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. So is there a common thread connecting how the greatest performers in the world use their minds to pursue the boundaries of human potential? This is the question that has driven Dr. Michael Gervais throughout his career as one of the most successful performance coaches in the world. His clients include world record holders, Olympians, internationally acclaimed artists and musicians, MVPs from every major sport, and Fortune 100 companies including Microsoft, Boeing, and Zynga. So Michael's a psychologist who specializes in working with professionals in high-stakes environments when it counts the most. Literally, that can be in a life and death situation. In fact, he helped Felix Baumgartner become the first person in the world to make a free fall jump from space in 2012 when he leapt from the Red Bull Stratos platform and fell to Earth faster than the speed of sound. Last year, millions of people across the globe held their breath as American skydiver Luke Aikens jumped out of a plane without a parachute or a wingsuit in a dramatic live-or-die situation. He fell for 2.5 minutes, eventually safely landing in a 100 by 100-foot net that he and his team had put together. Aikens is now in the history books as the first complete skydive without a parachute, and Dr. Gervais' training was critical to his success. Now, finally, he was brought in by the Seattle Seahawks to provide the team with the mental edge they needed to win the Super Bowl in 2013. Well, today, he joins us here at Self-Made Man to give us some insights into his process and how we can unlock our full potential in life. Please help me welcome Dr. Michael Gervais. Well, Dr. Michael Gervais, welcome to Self-Made Man. I'm extremely excited and grateful for the time today, and the fact that we get to have you on the show is just absolutely awesome. So thank you so much.
I'm stoked to be with you, Mike. Thanks for having me and taking the time and interest to have this conversation.
You bet. So I've already kind of given people an idea of your bio and your accomplishments that you've had throughout your career, which are substantial. So I wanted to start by asking you to take us through a little bit about your story and how you have become, one of the prominent performance psychologists, if you will, to the world.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. And so it started when I was a young athlete, and surfing was my sport of choice. And there was a distinct difference between what I was able to do in free surfing when it was just me and whoever I was surfing with and Mother Nature, and that was it. And there was an incredible freedom, and I could do a lot of things. I spent a lot of time in the water, so I had a good command of the skill there. And as soon as the competitions would turn on, I was a disaster. I didn't understand what was wrong, but I couldn't feel mind you, I'm 15, 16 years old at this point, but I felt like I couldn't feel my board underneath my feet. It felt like I was completely out of rhythm, that my body and mind were decoupled and there was no syncopation at all. And it felt like I was a complete rookie. And it wasn't until one day that I was surfing in one of these competitions, and a grown man who was in my heat paddled by me and said, "Hey, Gervais." And he had seen me surf all the time. He was a local guy. And he said, "Hey, Gervais, you got to stop thinking about what could go wrong." And he paddled away. And I thought to myself, like, how the hell does he know that I'm a disaster? And it's because he just could look at my body language, and he could tell that I wasn't able to do the things that I was doing on Tuesday on this day of competition, right? Like Tuesday last week, I should say. And so, like a good competitor, he didn't tell me what to do. He just told me to stop blowing it. It's kind of like saying to somebody, "Hey, just relax." Well, no kidding. I'm trying. Right. Oh, great. Now you know I'm a mess. So it makes it even worse. And so he paddled away, and I sat there for just a moment as a curious little 15-year-old that's scared out of his mind is trying to sort out. And I said, well, if he didn't tell me he told me what not to do, what should I do? And I sat there for a moment, and I thought about, well, let me just think about how I want to feel and how I want to experience this next wave if I get a chance. And so I started I didn't know at the time, doing some imagery while I was, in the ocean waiting for the next wave. And what it did by default is it pushed out all the noise of my distracted mind and got me more connected to the signal, which is how I wanted to be in that moment. And so I didn't know what that was, but when I paddled to jump into the next wave, all of a sudden it felt normal again. It felt like me again. And I didn't even know there was a discipline called sports psychology. I was literally a 15-year-old that was trying to figure out my way in life. And eventually what ended up happening is I just fell in love with the discipline of psychology first. And I could water this story for a long time, but I'll shorten it up for you. Is that I fell in love with the discipline of psychology, and then when I went to continue after graduating with a bachelor's degree, I started a master's degree in traditional psychology, and I dropped out in the first semester. And I dropped out because I thought there's no frickin' way I'm going to spend the rest of my life studying the brokenness of the human experience and listening to people complain. And that was my mindset as a 19-year-old. And I'm thankful that I had that lack of compassion, I guess you will, to drop out. And my parents supported me, and they were a little concerned. And mind you, no one in my family had gone to school before. No one in my family went to college. So I was blazing new trails for the family legacy. And there I was, dropping out with all the hope that, maybe I would continue in school. And I dropped out because it wasn't a right fit. And one of my mentors said to me, Mike, you love psychology. It seems like you really have taken to it. You obviously love sport. Have you heard of this discipline? It's a kind of a new discipline, but you can get a degree in it called sports psychology. And I thought, I got to check it out. And essentially, it was the study of human excellence. It was the study of how the most exceptional performers in our time and historically have conditioned and trained their mind to be fully present, to believe that something amazing is possible for them, and to be strong enough to deal with the stuff that doesn't go well. And so that led me on the path to no one ever to have to challenge me to read a book again. And I just went as far in the academic path as I could. And I got a PhD in psychology with a specialization in sport and performance, and then cut my teeth in very high stakes environments with a unique understanding now of how the mind works in more rugged and hostile environments.
Well, I'm curious as to how you broke into professional athletics and starting to work with Coach Pete Carroll and the Seahawks and just all of these teams and athletes, right? Where it's like you're this young guy, you're passionate about the subject matter. Do you just write an email or pick up the phone and like, hey, I think I can help you guys, or what did that look like?
Yeah, not a chance. I'll start in reverse order. Is that I get, like you probably get, bombarded with emails on a weekly basis, like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. I love what you're doing. It's amazing, this, that, and the other, and I'd love to spend 15 minutes. I'll buy you coffee. It's like, are you kidding me? I don't have enough time to get home to see my family, let alone to someone turn me upside down and try to empty the changes in my pocket. So, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding like a jerk about that, but it's like, no, that doesn't work. that I would never recommend that to anybody. Calling somebody that has, like Coach Carroll, who's an extraordinary world-class coach, and saying, hey, can I spend some time and meet you for my benefit? Not a chance.
Right.
And so the way it worked for me is I'd never once thought or cared about working with elite athletes. That's not where my heart was. It's not where my mind was. It was not where my interest was. My interest was really try to understand this very complicated and invisible hardware-software interface between hardware meaning the brain and body and software meaning the mind. And I was just maniacally consumed with trying to understand how to maximize that interface, those two pieces of the human experience. And so it was just kind of naturally happened. Somebody locally I grew up in Los Angeles, and somebody said, hey, this is right out of graduate school. Hey, there's a local hockey team that might be interested in what you're doing. Would you want to talk to them? I said, sure. So I met with the general manager, and then that turned into my first experience in pro sports, but it was never an interest. Now, to make this a little bit more accurate, because that sounds like it's too easy, is that for 18 years, I dedicated every Saturday night of my life in a basketball gym. And it was a program I started from a nonprofit called South Bay Children's Health Center. And it's a foundation in Los Angeles. And they were sitting on a pile of money from a government grant to do good in the community. And so I thought, okay, let me pitch this idea. if I could open up a gym and literally share what I just learned last week in these phenomenal classes of sport and performance psychology with a group of athletes from all over Los Angeles that were high school and college age, would you guys want to fund that? And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. So every Saturday night for 18 years, and that means no date night with my wife, and at the time, that I was in a gym trying to work out how to explain the stuff that I was learning. So it's like there was a lot of cutting teeth. My office was a broom closet, janitor's broom closet with no windows, that literally every week I was trying to chase rats out because they were just leaving droppings all over the place. It was hard to focus. So there's a long journey behind being able to, what I'm so grateful. It's like, how lucky am I, how fortunate am I to work with world-class performers, whether it be musicians or athletes in a variety of domains. It's like, I'm so grateful for it. So, but there is a long journey of cutting one's teeth that anybody that wants to pursue their own potential has to nod their head to say, okay, yes, I'm going to stay in the gully of the beast, and I'm going to stay in it and do that hard work.
So I'm really excited about this conversation today for one primary reason, which is the fact that I don't know if I can particularly articulate what I've done to achieve what I've achieved during my life. And you've clearly, come up with the process and the mental process and the psychology behind achievement. And, for me, I've always just had a goal in my head as far as what I wanted to accomplish in life and what I wanted my life to look like, or I had a really shitty situation I wanted to desperately get out of, and I would just logically break down what I needed to do to get out of it or accomplish what I needed to do, and I would just start doing it. So that's not very helpful to people, though, especially, a couple 100,000 entrepreneurs who are listening to this, many of whom are brand new and just getting started.
Yes and no, though. Yes and no. I mean, like, if you deconstruct that a little bit, it's, why do people change? Because of pain. And so that was the first part of your piece there, is like, I was in a shitty situation. So that's the pain piece. And I'll just kind of pull out of that thought before I get to the second thought, is that, the worst thing that we can do for our loved ones is to decrease or remove pain. That's the worst thing. It's like the naive psychologist wants to just help somebody across from them feel better. That's a mistake. We want to be able to help people get connected to their pain so that they can make a declaration, I'm done with that. Like, I'm done with conditioning creating my life circumstances that put me back in this situation over and over and over again to feel this pain. So we want to help people get connected to the source of their discomfort or pain and say, yeah, okay, good. There you are. Now what do you want to do with that? You don't have to do anything. You don't have to change anything. But now you're at the root cause like of some suffering. Like, what do you want to do with that?
Absolutely. I've always noticed that every successful entrepreneur I've ever met has typically come from some kind of pain in their past, and that's what drove them to change. So.
And I'm nodding my head because the tip of the arrow performers in the world, I'm so convinced of this. I'll make it a big statement, like 95% of them, it might even be 100. They come from a source of some type of neurotic experience, like early on. Like, why else work so freaking hard to push to the limits of your potential? It's hard. So why do that? And it's out of some sort of desperate neurotic need to know that you're okay. And that in and of itself is problematic if we work hard from a neurotic state and never grow from that place. And we end up just searching for a bigger watch, a bigger car, a bigger house, a bigger office, whatever it might be, bigger bank accounts, so that we think that that's going to fill our internal need. And so it doesn't mean that that neurotic state is necessary, but I've found so many of them that it comes from that place. And what they end up doing, Mike, is that the healthy ones, they transform from that into like a deep commitment to helping other people, a deep commitment to loving the way it feels to figure things out, a deep commitment to maybe the global well-being. And so that transformation is really important. And the earlier we can get on that transformational process, I think the greater rising tide we create for our own family legacy, as well as potentially, if we're skilled enough, the rhythm of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the primary missions of the podcast, and something that I think we definitely have in common. So, no pressure. We've got 38 minutes and a group of very ambitious individuals who want to better their own lives and better the world. What can we share with them that will help set them on this path of being the best that they can be and to make the biggest impact that they can make?
Well, I think you hinted on the beginnings of it, which is you had a vision, you had an idea, you had a goal, or some sort of mark of achievement that you wanted to have. And I would say that before we get to that, that would almost be like part two. Part one is to do the lonely work, to have a clear sense of your philosophy in life. And that seems so daunting. It seems so big to think about articulating your philosophy in life. However, when we think about the greatest influencers of the world and use the word impact, we think about religious leaders and we think about political leaders. And if you think about Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King, it was so clear what he stood for. His philosophy was so clear and how did we know that? Because that's what he thought about. That's what his words lined up with, and that's what his actions lined up with. So having a philosophy and being able to articulate that philosophy in just a handful of words is a wick that runs through many of the most dynamic and powerful and influential movers of our time. And it doesn't mean that that's reserved for some other person, like, the greats of the world. Like, to change and impact your family legacy starts with a philosophy. So I'd encourage people to start with that lonely, deep work.
Is there a question or series of questions somebody can ask themselves to help define their philosophy?
Yeah, no, yes and no. I mean, it's like it takes years, and it takes first, though, this idea to say, well, what is my philosophy? And all the words of the English language or the native tongue that a person's listening to, what are the words, the handful of words that matter most to me? So that's like just valuing that's an important exercise will be the beginnings of it. And as sure as we're talking, 99% of people listening will say, yeah, that sounds, I guess, kind of good. I'm not sure I'm going to do it. And that response to something that I'm telling you is as clear as I possibly can, that is a common thread amongst people that have had incredible internal and external success, is they're very clear about what they stand for. But it's hard, so most people won't do it. And so before we say, is there a set of practices? The first is making a commitment just to put pen and paper down and say, what is my philosophy? And just let it flow. Now, once you've got your pen and paper in hand, then you might want to ease into it. And that easing into it is to write down a list of people that have been influential in your life. And it could be people you know or don't know. And just create a list of, 7, 10, 12, 15 people, and write to the right of each one of those people, write down the characteristic that they embody. What do they stand for? And that's just to prime the pump, to get the juices rolling just a little bit. So that would be like phase one and phase two of moving into, actually anchoring a philosophy. And phase three might be to muse just a little bit, move away from the paper and pencil and go online and just see if you can explore other philosophies of people that you're interested in and see if they've been able to articulate it.
So is a philosophy one sentence long? Is it a half a page?
It's got to be able to get out at knife point in a dark alley.
Okay.
So whatever that takes to get it so crisp and so clear that you can get it out under duress, then you've done the beginning part of the work to say, it's this crisp for me. For Martin Luther King, it was equality. For Malcolm X, it was also equality, but they just had different ways of going about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
let me pull on it for folks that are spiritually inclined as well, is that Buddha's philosophy, and I don't want to oversimplify a complicated, nuanced set of principles that Buddha and Confucius and Jesus, stood for. But let's use those three because they're so influential in modern day times. That Jesus stood for really love, right? Like do unto others and love. That was what he stood for in most stories. And then Buddha, the same thing. It was the idea, though, that all people are suffering. So from suffering, and when we embrace suffering, then we can work with loving kindness or act with loving kindness. And Confucius had a different idea, and this is still evidenced in modern times now, as he said, we have to figure out ourself. And once we figure out ourself, then we can try to help our family members. Once we help our family members, it's like a pebble in a pond, and it ripples outward. And once we help our family members be themselves and be authentic, then we can move out to the neighborhood and maybe even the entire state. So those are some clear, crisp examples, if you will.
So what is yours?
Yeah. So I'm happy to share mine with you. And it's pretty simple at this point, and it's right at the center of what I stand for, is that every day is an opportunity to create a living masterpiece. And so it doesn't matter if you or listeners know exactly what that stands for, but there's key words in there that I've worked to operationalize and define, like creating. So every day is an opportunity. That's an optimistic way of looking through the world. Creating is this idea that I have some efficacy and some determination and some command of my own experience. And then to create what? A living masterpiece. Each day, day in and day out, that there's a fullness and an aliveness that only comes from getting right to the edge and revealing my authentic self. So that's what a living masterpiece is for me.
Very cool. Very cool. So once you've got that really clearly defined, or maybe there's a lot of people listening to this who already feel that they do, what comes next?
I tell you what, Coach Carroll and I, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, we joined forces to build a business about 4 years ago now. And last year we trained in person with our staff 8 hours a day inside of corporations, a full 1-day training. And we would do anywhere between 200 to 2,000 people at a time. And so we trained over 2,000 people last year, just trying to figure out how to have an escape velocity of in-person to digital. And the amount of people that raised their hand when I would ask them, or our staff would ask them, how many of you have a personal philosophy? I say at a room of 1,000 people, about 15 would raise their hand. And then when we say, okay, who wants to come up on stage and share it with us? Only the one narcissist left in the group would want to come up. So literally from 1,000 to 15, from that 15 to actually be able to say it, there was literally just usually one, and most of the time none. Mm. And so I don't want to assume that anyone has it. And I know it sounds esoteric, and I kind of cringe even talking about have a personal philosophy. But if you don't have it, it's really hard to have a compass on how you want to think and how you want to use words and how you want to act when the shit is really hard. And so it starts with that personal philosophy begins to be the filter that you push your words through and your thoughts through. It becomes the compass for you when it's when you're in the middle of really difficult times.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. This reminds me of a process that, at least it's the closest that I can think of, that I went through 3 years ago at a Day with Destiny at a Tony Robbins event, where that was part of the curriculum was to essentially come up with your mission in life, if you will. Parts of this sound very similar to that, but
I would hope actually not.
Okay.
but I say that out with all respect for his skill set, and I don't know how he works. I'm hoping that how this is translating though is that this is not about a mission in life, but this is about the grounding nature to be your authentic self.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, once you do have that, I assume there's a step 2 that y'all take people through to the process.
Yeah, for sure. The idea, I just want to hit this thought before we go forward. The idea that we need to do more to be more is fundamentally broken. That model has got us trapped and sick as a society. So this is not about, achievement in any way, shape or form for me. Now, achievement is fun. It's good. It pays the bills and allows us to keep going and moving into demonstrating that we've got some command of craft and command of mind and body possibly. But the idea is that we need to be more to be able to do more, and to allow the being to flow. To allow the doing to flow from the being. And that's where we get into that idea of authentic expression, which that relentless pursuit to authentically express who you are, that's where we have a life that has meaning and purpose. And that, again, it's just so hard to do. It is so hard to do. But if there is a step 2, in that step 2 process, it would be to nod your head up and down that if I'm really going to go the distance and live a life of high performance, right, of meaning, purpose, and really getting after it in life, whether it be in business or whatever, is that I'm going to run right to it's required that I run right to the edge of the ledge, my ledge, that space in me that is met with instability. It's that emotional, challenging place or that physically difficult place. There's no such thing as mentally uncomfortable. It's either emotional or physical. And to get right to that edge. So if we're going to get right to that edge, we've got to have some skills, some mental skills on how to deal with ourselves in those difficult moments. And that's why we talk about front loading the mental skills before you actually get to the edge. And once you're at the edge, that's where you sort out who you are and you really reveal how you respond to adversity. It's too late to say, what am I supposed to think now? How am I supposed to breathe? How do I, generate a sense of optimism? So step 2 is investing in a psychological framework and then the mental skills that allow us to perform well and to be grounded in difficult moments. And I'm happy to go through a handful of those skills if you'd like me to.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I'm sitting here thinking if there's anything that you can share with everybody that they can start to apply or use on a daily basis, whether that's the way they speak to themselves or what they think about, that could be applicable here in the tiny amount of time that we have, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah. And what I want to do too, Mike, is I also don't want to thin slice tactics.
Okay.
And so if we're just left with like these beautiful snowflakes and in and of themselves think that this one tactic is going to change our life fundamentally, it's wrong. So the idea of hacking anything, I think, is broken. The idea of just grabbing one tactic or one tool to become the best version of myself is fundamentally wrong. It begins with an orientation to organize our entire life towards the man or woman that we're working on becoming and to aggressively run into challenging environments to see how well our craft, our body, and our mind hold up in those moments. There's only 3 things that we can train. And so when you're asking me to give you something very applied, which I will do that for you, but I just want to put an asterisk next to it. But you're asking for the applied nature, which is training. And there's only 3 things we can train. Train your craft, your body, and your mind. So first off, make sure your craft is on point. And that craft might be the skills required to be a great parent, if that's the thing that's most interesting to you, or the skills of entrepreneurship or finance or decision-making under duress. Like, what is the craft? And be rock solid with that craft, but knowing that there's a choke point. That choke point is the moment in time where our mind begins to constrict because we feel as though we're under pressure or duress or there's some hostility that we've interpreted in our environment, and we choke off access to our ability to think clearly. We choke off access to our craft, if you will. So investing deeply with deep practice on a daily basis into the craft. And the challenge for entrepreneurs, which I'll put myself, I know seems really vogue to consider yourself an entrepreneur, but Coach Carroll and I have been at this thing together for 5 years. We got to a place of scale that we had to bring on a CEO, and he's phenomenal at what he does. Michael Gale, what's up, Michael? But one of the challenges for entrepreneurs is that we don't get feedback on how we're doing on our craft. And so, how do we get feedback on our craft? Who are the people or the processes that we put in place to know if the email that we sent is on point? To know if the strategy that we have in place and the way that we've crafted it is timely and accurate. So we need a feedback system and a feedback mechanism to get better at that. And so, again, I'm not getting to a tactic yet, but the idea of changing our relationship with authentic feedback is really important. And so if we can figure out how to be thirsty and hungry for feedback from either the world that we're working in or other people, those 2 things become increasingly important. Now, over to the mental training. Okay, so we worked on the philosophy, and I'd say don't start until you get the philosophy right. Don't bother with any of the other tactics, right? Like, who are you? Who are you working on becoming is kind of where we should start. Then the mental skills of knowing how to generate in any environment confidence, a sense of calm, the ability to focus in the present moment, and to know how to trust yourself. Those 4 mental skills are paramount. But what precedes those 4 is a sense of mindfulness, a sense of awareness. And if you want, I can go into the mechanics of mindfulness training, or I can go into confidence, calm, focus, trust. And then there's a suite of 8 other skills that we spend a lot of time thinking about as well.
Whatever you think would be best.
I'd say start with mindfulness.
Okay.
And so mindfulness has been around 2,600 years. It's a long time. It's Modern day science is finding incredible changes that take place in the brain and in our psychology, our mind and our brain, for people that practice mindfulness. It's been found to be one of the precursors to a flow state, which is the most optimal state a human can be in. So I'll be more crisp with that research, as those that practice mindfulness had an increased frequency in flow state.
I have to jump in real quick for you and ask you if you could to describe the definition of mindfulness, because I think that that's a word that's thrown out in 1,000 different contexts these days.
Yeah, so
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for that, Mike. And mindfulness is if we follow a definition by one of the grandfathers in the field, it's from John Kabat-Zinn, who's, if you're not familiar with his work, it's phenomenal and it's important and it's significant. It's a particular way of being in the present moment without judgment. So it's the way that we talk about it, or that I talk about it with athletes, is the ability to be where your feet are. And if you can do that without judgment, that's what mindfulness is. So it's a particular way of being in the present moment. And what pulls us out of the present moment is judgment and critique and worry and frustration. So that's what mindfulness is. And it's a state of being. You can be mindful. And it's also something that you can train. It's a skill. And so it's an ability as well. Anything that's an ability, we can get better at. So you can train mindfulness to increase the frequency of being mindful, which means being present. And why is that important? Because when we're present, that's where high performance takes place. That's where all the good stuff in life is revealed in the present moment. So for great athletes, I spend a lot of time with them. They already know how to be present, but increasing their ability to be present in difficult situations. And so, let me take it one step further. There's 2 pillars of mindfulness. The first pillar is awareness of 4 things: awareness of thoughts, awareness of your emotions, awareness of your body sensations, and awareness of the unfolding environment around you. If we just stopped on that first pillar of mindfulness, you'd be a better performer. Right? Because if you move up the chain of impact, if you're aware of your thoughts drive emotions, emotions impact performance. And if you move up that chain of impact, you become a better performer. But that would be selling mindfulness far, 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 far short, because the second pillar of mindfulness is insight and wisdom. And it's that nature, it's that process of revealing the nature that is within us, revealing the authentic true self that's already inside. And again, that takes time and discipline. But the way to do that is to live more frequently in the present moment. And when we can stitch together the present moment over time, and we just get glimpses of stitching together 1, 2, 3, 4 moments at a time, we reveal glimpses of our potential. And so, that's kind of the mechanical part of mindfulness. And then how do you actually do it? That's what a lot of people want to know. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the practice or your audience is, but so I don't know if you want me to go any further on it.
Well, I mean, if this is the foundation, I think that would be a great place to go.
Yeah. First of all, it's also important to recognize that it doesn't mean, just because it was first introduced by Buddhists and Buddhism, doesn't mean that it is a spiritual process. It can be, and it certainly is one, but there's also a secular nature to it. The essence of mindfulness training is a focus training. That's it. Focusing on being in the present moment. So science would suggest that there's a minimal effective dose to get incredible changes in the brain and our experience in life at about 8 minutes a day. And the optimal dose is somewhere around 20 minutes a day. So somewhere in between there, is the playground for effectiveness. Now, what do you actually do? The idea that to get to a state of no thoughts, that's not it. That's not what it is. Mindfulness is just a way of becoming familiar with your interior, becoming familiar with the fabric and the texture of your mind by just observing. That's it. And just watching your thoughts, watching where they go and observing without judgment and critique. And that's called contemplative mindfulness or contemplative meditation. And so just watching how one thought stitches and links to another thought and loops back around to the first thought and maybe goes into a third thought. And that third thought takes you somewhere back into your childhood, or it takes you into your future, wherever it goes. But just observing the stringing and the trains of thoughts is the process. Now, that's called contemplative. Now, the other type, there's 2 buckets of mindfulness, contemplative and single point. Single point mindfulness is literally focusing on one thing for an extended period of time. And when that easily distracted mind of ours, that drunk monkey, if you will, is distracted from the one thing, you gently bring it back to the present moment. And so it's like where I start with people is just focusing on just the inhale. See if you can master just the inhale. That's it. Just master the inhale. That takes about 4 seconds. And if you can do that without your mind wandering, really cool. When it does wander, gently bring it back. And then work on mastering the exhale. And if that exhale is somewhere around 10, 12 seconds, cool. You want your exhale to be a little bit longer than your inhale, and you want to do both of those through your nose.
Okay.
That's it. That's it. It's that simple, and it is as hard as you can possibly imagine.
So every single top performer that I've heard a podcast of or read a book of for the last few years, they've all been on, the meditation train. And it's something that I've played around with a few times. I have yet to make it a part of my daily routine. I'm not sure exactly why, but I've fought that for some reason. But one of the most effective tools that I've ever used when I was practicing, and I was just going to get your take on it, was the Muse headset. I don't know if you know what that is or have played with it.
I do. I'm familiar with it. I haven't used it myself. And, I've got a relatively advanced understanding of neurofeedback and how it works. And I say relative because there's people that know lots more than I know about it. And, at one point in time, I invested in a neurofeedback company, and it is, there's something to be said about having a high fidelity technology that gives accurate signal to how your brain is experiencing a present moment. I'm not sure where Muse is on their fidelity, and I'm not being critical, I just don't know where they are. But I do know that the most sensitive instrument that we have is our own mind, and it is our own body. And so to put on an apparatus to tell me how I'm doing seems like I'm shortchanging what has been around for thousands of years. Is just listen. Just feel, just notice and observe. And the technology is cool. When you've got the right tone, it means you're in a more alpha brainwave state. That's good. Or maybe a theta brainwave or suppression of beta brainwaves if you want to get fancy. That's cool. By no means would I ever downgrade that. But I would upgrade the idea that thousands of years ago, nobody had this technology. Doesn't mean that we should just do what the ancients did. But the amount of time it takes to put on a headset or to strap on some high fidelity neurofeedback training, for me, I don't appreciate. I don't want to spend that kind of time on it. So just grab a pillow and sit or stand and see if you can focus on one full inhale and one full exhale. And you'll notice that you can't. You won't be able to do it. And I'm not saying that I can do it better. And then when your mind wanders, as slippery as saying, Did I do it right? Is this it? No, no, that's thinking about breathing. That's thinking about, the evaluation of my breathing. Is just see if you can recover and come back to the present moment with one breath. And, there's thousands of different ways to do mindfulness, but these are the 2 ways that I like to begin people on the training.
And this is such a big process that we're trying to cram in here into just a few minutes. I want to kind of give people an idea of the journey, right? So that becomes a part of their daily routine. And then what would you have them go through next?
Well, I would have, after some sort of mindfulness training, then, it depends. I mean, some people don't need to work on confidence and self-talk because they're just brilliant at it. They're really good at it. But if confidence is something that you'd like to get better at, then I would say there's a couple-step process. Is that what we want to do is know all the thoughts that get us twisted, and write those down. Just externalize your hard drive and write them down. Write all the thoughts that are nasty or destructive or don't work for you anymore. They're no longer part of Mike 4.0. I don't know what version of yourself you are, Mike, but like those thoughts don't work. I wish I had less of those. Write them down so that you can see them, right? And then on a kind of a separate column or separate piece of paper, write down the thoughts that are naturally in your head when it's good to be you. And so what do those thoughts sound like? How do you talk to yourself when you're on point? But that's not enough. Then from that place, from each epic thought that you have, each great positive thought that you have, you need to do the work to remind yourself of why you've earned the right to say that thing to yourself. So if the statement is, let's say, I don't know, you want to be a better fighter, like an MMA fighter or something. You would say to yourself, I'm a tough son of a bitch. If that's a statement that you say when it's good to be you, well, then back it up with 3 experiences that give you the right to say that. So that becomes a process. And that's one way to train the foundations of confidence.
And so, how often are you thinking these thoughts or having this self-talk? Is this a thing that you do throughout the day whenever you find yourself getting off track and you just correct yourself, or what does that look like?
Yeah, like looking in a mirror and saying good things to yourself. No, that's not it. It's like you do the first lonely work that I just described first. You do that work, and then it's a parallel track with mindfulness. When you are aware of your thoughts that don't work for you, that are leading to some sort of anxious or easily frustrated state or fear-based state, then you gently guide your mind back to the thing at hand, whatever that is. And if you can't lock into the thing at hand, the most important task at hand, which might be writing the email, you might need to go to a thought, which is like, you know what? I can do difficult things. And you just remind yourself, I can do difficult things. This is difficult. I'm going to figure it out. And it becomes this, it's not mechanical. The first part of what I described is mechanical, to do the work to write it down, but it becomes a very fluid experience. We have thousands and thousands of inner conversations with ourselves all day long. So it's this standing civil war within ourselves that we want to get better at. And that's a very fluid nature.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. And if there's one final, I guess, piece that we could provide here of insight, what would that be?
I would say we shouldn't go any further. I would say that, and I could go on for hours, on ways to condition your mind. But I also feel like this feels a little bit like, okay, give me that one little tool. It's just not that. And I know that your listeners want to grab onto the thing that's going to help them, which is totally cool. And I'm such a fan of modern technology being able to help us in this way. But I'd say just start with the basics. Get your philosophy locked in, make a commitment to mindfulness. And I would say begin and end there for an extended period of time. And that would be a significant contribution to the inner engineering of the man or woman you want to be.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, clearly we've just scratched the surface of, frankly, what's been your life's work, but that is a lifelong process for anybody. There's going to be, myself included, but there's going to be a lot of other people who hear this and like, okay, I want to continue this conversation, to continue this, this kind of self-development education. Is obviously you've got the podcast, which we can share that with as well. But where can people go to continue to learn from you and about your work?
Oh, thank you. As a closing note, I really want to again thank you for being interested in this part of the human experience, and I love it, and I love that you love it, and I'm excited for all the folks that you are able to open up their minds to how to train their minds. So thank you for including me. And I would end the note before we talk about where to find me, in the note on the importance of being able to love other people. And that begins with like a really deep commitment to love yourself, independent of all the successes and flaws you've had, but to incorporate all of those and to hold up that, mirror of yourself and say, I'm flawed and I'm broken. And there's parts of me that don't work and they're not shiny and pretty. And I know that Instagram doesn't want to see that part of me, but I know it and I respect it. And that is me. And to fully embrace ourselves in that way, to fundamentally orientate our relationship with ourselves, to have that deep regard, therein how we are able to have a deep regard for other people. And if you are an entrepreneur, and that's your audience base here, and if you're an entrepreneur starting something up, it's not the tactics that's going to get you to win. It is not. Like, they're important. It's not the strategy. It's important. It's the connection of the people that you have decided to go into work with and the people that you're going to lock arms with to go into the next phase of business, to do something difficult. And when those people know that they matter just because of who they are, not because of what they do, and they know, not as a tactic, but it comes from a real deep source, that you care about their well-being and their family's well-being and their extended family's well-being, that becomes an accelerant far beyond anything that strategy or business school will offer us. It's that deep investment in one's own authentic journey of discovery so that we can create a rising tide for other people to do the same in their lives. That is where great business hopefully comes from. And so I just want to make sure that, I pivot on that piece just a little bit.
That's awesome. That was fantastic. Thank you.
And then, so where to kind of tag along, or no, that's not right. That sounds awful. I feel like I'm tagging along with everyone on social media. So I've got 2 places. I'm doing something very similar to what you're doing. I've got a podcast that I'm wanting to learn from and celebrate the minds of exceptional people and their stories and their journeys, and it's called Finding Mastery, and that's on all the iTunes players as well as Google Play and all that good stuff that I'm sure yours is on. So findingmastery.net. And then on social media is at Michael Gervais, and that is Michael, just like it sounds. And then Gervais is Gerv as in Victor, AIS as in Sam. And then we've got a Coach Carol, and he and I, our business is compete2create.net.
Awesome. And I know folks are going to go to that website like I did and like see that I can't really interact with it at the moment. Can you give people a little bit of context about what you currently do through that business, and then where you guys are headed in a couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's nothing, it's a billboard. And so it just describes what we're doing. But the way to engage with what we're doing is through the podcast, and I guess social media as well, but it's really the podcast. So the business is, we've taken his insights and practices on how to switch on cultures to become vibrant and progressive and to reach extraordinary results. And then my craft on how to train the minds of people who want to become their very best. And we layered those 2 things on top of each other. And we experimented in the most dynamic and healthy way at the Seattle Seahawks. And it worked. And going into our first Super Bowl, he says, Mike, do you think anyone would be interested in what we're doing here? Anyone outside of sport? Do you think anyone would be interested in this stuff? And within a half a beat, I couldn't get the answer out where he said, let's just write it down. And so he said, you write your stuff, I'll write my stuff, and then together we'll write our stuff down that we're doing together. And we created a curriculum. And then that curriculum turned into an 8-hour training. That 8-hour training turned into, we had to hire Olympians and sports psychologists to deliver that 8-hour training, which was an awesome experience for us to be around those bright minds. And then that turned into a 4-week online course. And that 4-week online course, you have Olympians and sports psychologists that are coaching your mind during that 4-week course. And then that turned into an app that we've developed. And all of that is only right now for a handful of companies. We're going long and deep with a handful before we figure out how to open it up to a general, more mass audience. So right now, if you've got a company that wants to bring us in, we've got the capability for scale that way, but we're not quite ready for individual users yet.
Okay, awesome. And is there a particular size that's ideal for y'all from a corporate standpoint?
Well, right now it's like we're like in very large, like 100,000 employee base. And we flirted with the 500 person and to 1,500. And I don't think that there's, I think we're well suited for both right now. And so, so a company that has a handful of people that are really dedicated to wanting to be better. And I'd say, it doesn't start to pay off really from an economic standpoint unless you've got 500 to 1,000 people.
Got it. I just want to make sure that we don't have, a couple hundred people reaching out that are not, your ideal clientele right now. So
yeah. I appreciate that. And the best place is Finding Mastery for that. But if you are a contributor to a large organization and know the importance of people in our lives and to deconstruct how we can live more deeply and not be so caught up in the work rhythm of stress, and you want to learn how the best in the world from an athletic standpoint train their mind, those are the folks that we're speaking to.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Michael Gervais, thank you so much for the time. This has been, my brain is twisted in like 3 different ways right now, and it's going to be really fun to untwist it.
Don't do that. No, make it simple. Write down your philosophy, and it'd be fun. Send it to me. I'd love to fire back some thoughts on it. Send it to me. I'll hold you accountable.
Yeah. No,
Come on, Mike, let's go. Write it down. Let's do it. And then make a commitment. You and your team, you and your folks on your podcast here, make a commitment to go on a 7-day run of mindfulness. Compete with each other. And you know what? You can go on our website and log your mindful minutes. We've got a little competition we're doing, million mindful minutes.
Nice.
And so you can log it in there. And maybe what we can do, we can talk afterwards. I'll give you a use code so you could track your folks and how much they're contributing.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, come on. Let's go, Mike.
Well, guys, go check out findingmastery.net, hook up with the podcast, and we're looking forward to your work. And when it becomes available to the public and the courses, as soon as that happens, let me know, and we'll have you back on the show and make sure everybody's aware of that.
All the best, Mike. Thanks so much again.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week. Take care.